Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, your guide from the dark side, Dawson Richard. And thank you guys so much for joining me in the debut episode of my new podcast, The Void Frequency. This is something I've kind of been wanting to work on for a long time now. I just didn't have the exact vision that I wanted. But now that I have free time and inspiration, I've decided to kickstart it. So a brief description of what this podcast is, and then we'll get right into today's story. So the subject, or I should say subjects, of this podcast are basically going to be a weird mixture of things. But when it comes down to brass tacks, the podcast is going to be about true crime, bizarre happenings, unexplained mysteries, murders, conspiracy theories, aliens, cryptids, and other spooky subject matter from across the world. So basically just some creepy shit. With that, be advised that a majority of this content will be explicit and kind of gruesome at times. So if you're squeamish around gore, blood, murder, and other heinous acts of violence, please back out now. You've been warned. So with all the formalities out of the way, let's get right into today's topic, the Sentinelese Tribe of the North Sentinel Island. So this is a really cool topic that I've always wanted to cover. You know those islanders in every pirate movie that are armed with spears and don't want people on their island, so they'll capture castaways and sacrifice them or eat them because they're cannibals? Minus the cannibal part, this is the real deal. There is a real tribe of indigenous people called the Sentinelese. They are located in the Bay of Bengal off the coast of India on the North Sentinel Island. And these guys, it's fucking crazy. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory on them, and then we're going to go right into their history. So let me put this into perspective for you. The Sentinelese have lived in isolation for 60,000 years. That's 60,000 years of the Stone Age, while the rest of the world is changing, adapting, evolving, inventing firearms and automobiles and the internet, and these guys are still sharpening sticks and building mud huts. That's crazy. They're hunter-gatherers, they use bow and arrows to hunt wildlife, and have methods of catching seafood such as canoes and fishing nets. Their numbers are estimated between 50 to 100, and that is because anthropologists haven't been able to go to the island to figure out the exact number. So we don't even know how many of them there are. The only other thing that we know about the Sentinelese is that they use metal in the crafting of their arrowheads and spearheads. They obtain these from the ships, and also the aluminum cookware that the National Geographic Society left behind for them, which we'll get into that later. Other reports show that they wear daggers on their waist belts along with necklaces and headbands, but for the most part, they're naked. They also wear the jawbones of deceased relatives, it sounds badass to me. But that's about all we know about them, so without further ado, let's go into their history. So the first recorded sighting of the Sentinelese was in the year 1771 when an East India Company vessel reported seeing multiple lights along the shores of the North Sentinel. So imagine, it's the middle of the night, you're sailing in this ship, and you're coasting along the side of this island that everyone says is uninhabited, and you start seeing lights along the shoreline, whoof. The first contact, however, was in 1867. When an Indian merchant vessel ran ashore of North Sentinel. On their third day, they stopped to have some breakfast, some pancakes, some eggs, some bacon, but they were assaulted by what they described as naked, red-painted, and short-haired islanders. They descended upon the crew with bows and arrows, which were believed to be iron-tipped. So these guys are probably, scared shitless. Well, their captain flees in the ship's boat and was found later by the Royal Navy, this guy is basically just fucking deuces, I'm out of here. So they send a rescue party to the island, and thankfully they find the other survivors, and they had repelled the natives with sticks and stones, and hadn't seen them again. Now this of course leads us to our first fatal encounter, in 1896. Next to the island of the North Sentinel is the Great Andaman Island, which was used as a penal colony for convicts. Well, in 1896, this convict escapes, right? He escapes the island, and he uses a makeshift raft to, sail away, obviously. He's trying to sail to freedom. And he drifts to the beaches of North Sentinel. Days later, whenever the guards or whatever sailed out to try and find him or see what island he had gone to, they found him on the beach of North Sentinel with several arrow piercings and his throat slit. This convict, though, was not the only one. Richard Carnac Temple was a chief commissioner of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, serving as the commissioner for the penal colonies. He served from 1895 to 1904, and in that time reported touring the North Sentinel Islands to look for escaped fugitives. I guess maybe it was in such close proximity that it was just a hotspot for the rafts. However, every time he went to the island, he found new convicts that were killed by the inhabitants of the island. So, fuck. Like, can you imagine these guys just, like, they build their raft, they get past the guards, and they're like, fuck yeah, man, I'm going home. Like, I beat the system, landing on the island, and then getting fucking, like, slaughtered by these inhabitants and these Sentinelese tribesmen. Crazy. So as the years go on, more and more sightings pop up of the Sentinelese. Ships report having arrows fired at them when they ventured too close to the beach. They reported seeing men out on the shore screaming and hollering at them. And so because of this, in 1956, the government of India officially declared North Sentinel Island a reserve and prohibited all visitation and photography. And to make sure that nobody went on the island, they had armed patrols preventing any intrusion. So jump forward a bit to 1967 when a group of 20 people, including T.N. Pandit, an anthropologist with the Anthropological Survey of India. So this guy's goal was to explore the island and befriend the Sentinelese. So this is the first time that an anthropologist actually went to the island to observe the people, and he would do this by watching them from afar with binoculars whenever they would come out on the beach. And eventually he made landing and entered the forest itself. So this guy's fucking ballsy. He and his team found 18 huts made from grass and leaves with still burning fires. Items that they found in the camps included raw honey, wild fruits, spears, bows, baskets, nets, and skeletal remains. Ooh, buddy. And also their use of metal was very evident. It was very clear that they were using metal in their crafting. So, in early 1974, a National Geographic film crew wanted to go to the island with a team of anthropologists, including our old boy T.N. Pandit, accompanied by armed police to film this documentary called Man in Search of Man. So they wanted to do this gift-giving operation over the course of a few days and, try to establish some friendly contact. Well, when their motorboat broke along the barrier reefs, the Sentinelese jump out of the jungle and start shooting arrows at him, right? And so the crew lands at this safe point and are throwing all these gifts out in the sand, like a plastic car, some coconuts, some cookware. And the Sentinelese follow up by launching more arrows, and one of them ends up striking the documentary director right in his thigh. So they're just sitting here trying to chuck gifts onto the sand, and this guy gets a fucking arrow through the leg. So the guy who wounded the director, and I love this part, so the islander that wounded the director reportedly withdrew to the shade of the trees and was laughing proudly. He's just so fucking pleased with himself. He's like, fuck yeah, I nailed you, bitch. This expedition, however, was viewed as sort of a success because it led to the first photograph of the Sentinelese published by Raghubir Singh in National Geographic magazine. I know I probably butchered that name. Where they were presented as a people for whom arrows speak louder than words. So, what an expedition, right? So, continuing through the 70s and 80s, our old boy, Big Bad Pandit, undertook some more expeditions to the island to establish friendly contact with the natives, and he actually claimed that most of these visits had a friendly outcome, but they sometimes ended with hostility or violence. And he actually managed to document some of his expeditions on film, and you can actually find those films on YouTube. The Sentinelese would sometimes wave, they'd walk out to meet the expedition team, but there were other times where they would assume a defecating stance and sway their penises in the direction of the team. This was taken as a sign of not being welcome by the anthropologist, which, I mean, I don't know many situations where somebody waves their penis in your face or assumes a shitting position and it's seen as a good thing. So good on you, Pandit. You're probably right on that one. So Pandit's doing all this really hard work. He's really trying to bring the Sentinelese into the light of day. And his hard work pays off in 1991 when the first instance of peaceful contact is recorded over the course of 2 expeditions. It's conducted by an Indian anthropological team. They've got all these different representatives and stuff. So on the 4th of January 1991, they visit the Sentinelese and they approach the party without weaponry for the first time. This is a big deal because usually the Sentinelese are coming out on the shores, weapons at the ready. But for the first time, they come out unarmed. And so they happily take the coconuts from the team. It's like these big bags of coconuts that they're offering. And they retreated to the shore even as the team was gesturing for them to come closer. In the afternoon, the Sentinelese came back with about 2 dozen. One of the Sentinelese pointed a bow at the party, and this is crazy. A woman, a female tribesman, pushed the arrow down. So she's like basically like, hey, put that shit away, like. And so the man like puts his weapon down, and they approach the dinghies really close for like the first time. They're really fucking close to the boats. So this expedition was extremely important to the anthropologists because it showed that the Sentinelese weren't just crazed savages, they were people. And while that's all well and good, this podcast isn't about well and good. So in 2004, there was a massive tsunami in the Indian Ocean which caused massive tectonic changes and also exposed the surrounding coral reefs to air and destroyed a lot of shallow lagoons. Shallow lagoons where the Sentinelese would do all their fishing. So naturally, people were worried that maybe the Sentinelese, as small or large as they were, didn't survive the tsunami. So the government sends out these aerial expeditions to check on the island to see if the Sentinelese survived the tsunami. And on their first contact, on the first flyover, there was nothing. No word from the Sentinelese, no sightings. But as soon as that helicopter lowered itself just a little bit in altitude and came a little bit closer to the island, it was immediately peppered with arrows and spears by what looked to be the unaffected Sentinelese tribe. And this to me is just a way of them saying, I'm still here. So on the 27th of January 2006, 2 Indian fishermen, Sundar Raj and Pandit Tiwari, had been attempting to illegally harvest crabs off the North Sentinel Island. They drifted towards the island after their boat's makeshift anchor failed. And warning calls were given from passing fishermen. They're like, hey, you guys are drifting too far. But their boat drifted into the shallows near the island. And sure as shit, a group of Sentinelese warriors attacked the boat and killed the fishermen with axes. Now that's crazy, but get this. According to a report, the bodies were later put on bamboo stakes facing out to sea like scarecrows, like a warning. So they killed these guys and then strung them up to say like, hey, don't fuck with our island. So 3 days later, an Indian Coast Guard helicopter is dispatched and he finds the buried bodies. And while the helicopter tried to retrieve them, it was once again attacked by Sentinelese armed with spears and arrows, and they aborted the mission. Now this caused a lot of contrasting views in the local community as to whether the Sentinelese ought to be prosecuted for murder. And finally, we have the most recent and possibly tragic story of the Sentinelese. This took place in November 2018. Most of you have probably heard of John Allen Chau, and if you haven't, get ready. He was a 26-year-old American trained and sent by the US-based Christian missionary organization, All Nations. And he traveled to North Sentinel Island, believing that he could convert the Sentinelese to Christianity. He didn't seek any necessary permits, and he was going to go there illegally. So, you already know this is going to end badly. He bribed local fishermen, and he expressed a desire to convert the tribe, and he was very aware of the fact that he was facing death, and also that he was doing something illegal. And he wrote, this is an exact quote from John Allen Chau, "Lord, is this island Satan's last stronghold, where none have heard or even had the chance to hear your name? The eternal lives of this tribe is at hand, and I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God if I get killed. Don't retrieve my body." So he went into this knowing that he probably wasn't going to come out, which, I commend him because that takes bravery. But at the same time, it's just one of those situations where he didn't have he didn't even look for the proper permits. He, knew what he was doing was wrong, and he was bribing local fishermen, so he knew that he was making a mistake. So, on the 15th of November, Chau attempted his first visit to the island in a fishing boat. So the fishermen took him about 500, 700 meters from shore and were like, all right, man, this is it. This is as far as we go. You're not going any further. But he canoed towards the shore with a waterproof Bible. So he's putting himself in the lion's den at this point. So he approaches, he attempts to communicate, and he offers the islanders gifts, but then later retreats after facing some hostile responses. On another visit, Chow recorded that the islanders reacted to him with a mixture of amusement, bewilderment, and hostility. He attempted to sing worship songs to them and spoke to them in Xhosa, which, if you don't know, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it is a language commonly used in South Africa. And he tried speaking to them with this, and they fell silent, obviously, because they probably don't speak that language. Other attempts to communicate ended with them bursting into laughter, so they're getting a kick out of this guy. And he recorded that they communicated with high-pitched sounds and gestures. And according to Chow's last letter, when he tried to hand over some fish and some gifts, a boy shot a metal-headed arrow that pierced his Bible that he was holding in front of his chest. On his final visit on 17th of November, Chow instructed the fishermen to leave without him. So, you can probably tell where this is going to go. The fishermen later saw the islanders dragging Chow's body, and the next day they saw his body laying on the shore. The police then arrested the 7 fishermen for assisting Chow to get close to the restricted island, and his death was treated as a murder, but there was no suggestion that the Sentinelese would be charged, and the U.S. government confirmed that it did not ask the Indian government to press charges against the tribe. So, it's tragic. It is. And I don't mean to make, to laugh or make light of the situation, because a man died, and that is upsetting, but you have to think about what he was doing. He was illegally going to this island. He knew in his heart that he was probably going to die because of it. And while I respect him for trying to, bring his religion to other people, to people who he viewed as needing it, it ended in his death. And Indian officials made a bunch of attempts to recover his body, but they abandoned the efforts. And an anthropologist even said that the risk of a clash between investigators and the islanders was it's too great. It was too great to justify any attempts. So, to this day, Chow's body is lying in the sand on the North Sentinel Island. A result of a man who wanted to bring God to what he viewed as godless heathens. Wow. And with that somber note, we end our first episode of The Void Frequency. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It means a lot to have the support for a project that I'm hoping can grow and that I can improve upon. Let me know if there's anything that I can work on, if this was entertaining to you, if there's maybe a topic you want to hear about, or if there's something that I can do to make this podcast better. Let me know. You can either say something in the comments below or email the podcast's, email at thevoidfrequency@gmail.com. Once again, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you had a great time, and I hope that this, spooked you out a little bit. You got to hear some cool islanders killing some people. And join me next week, where we will be covering the exorcism of Anneliese Michel, the inspiration for the movie The Exorcist. Until next time, stay weird.